Hello. So, we did it. The first podcast is just about to start. The first ever podcast. And I am very, very excited that you're here and that you have the chance to watch it if you would like to. Um, just just a short introduction. So the video was done with Dr. Caes, who is teaching at the University of Stirling, and her main interests are in pain, especially as it relates to parents and children. So that is what we talked about, how emotional and physical pain relate together, and also how adverse childhood experiences can relate to that. Also, we touch upon a social support a little bit, and overall, it's about 55 minutes of a conversation which we talked after we both really enjoyed, and I'm really excited. I'm happy that Lynn was willing to be my first ever podcast guest. So this is my way of thanking her as well as in person and just right after the podcast. And I can't believe this actually happened, and I am so grateful. There's obviously, it is my first time, so there's many things that probably could be better and hopefully will be better in the future. So I just ask that you're kind. I can only do my best with what I have and with the experiences I don't have yet, but that is to come eventually. So two more things actually. There's going to be a second part. So we didn't actually manage to talk about everything that we wanted to initially. So we decided that we will do a part 2. So that is very exciting, and yeah, I think we can keep the information for next time when the second episode is out. So that's that. And then also a technicality in the file, for some reason the audio tracks overlap a couple of times. It's not many times, just like at the beginning and a little bit in there. It's not that we did speak over one another, it's just the tracks somewhere in the editing process or in the software that I used, it didn't match quite well, so I apologize for that, but hopefully that I will resolve that next time it goes around, because I couldn't manage this time, so bear with that. Otherwise, I believe that the content is very, very much worth listening to. Dr. Lynn is super easy to talk to. She explains things really well, and it was a pleasure to talk with her, and yeah, I'm beyond grateful. So I hope you enjoy it at least as much as we did. And yeah, feel free to let me know, and I'll talk to you soon. So welcome, Dr. Lynn. I am very happy that you've joined me for my first ever podcast. We're going to see where this takes us. Hopefully we're going to explore some interesting topics, and I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be your first guest. So yeah, let's get the ball rolling and see how it goes.
All right. So as a first thing, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Dr. Lina Caes, and I'm an associate professor in the Division of Psychology at the University of Stirling in Scotland. And kind of my main research interests lie around pediatric pain experiences in the wide sense of the word of pediatric, anywhere from preschoolers all the way to young adults experiencing pain. And that would be both acute pain experiences from, for example, vaccinations or falling down and scraping your knee as a preschooler, as well as chronic pain experiences such as lower back pain, migraines, or pain associated with diseases such as juvenile idiopathic arthritis. And I'm really interested to find out about the social context around these pain experiences, like how parents are affected, how parents can be supportive in these experiences, but also the wider social context, like friends, peers, teachers, school environment. How can they be supportive of both acute and chronic pain experiences?
Well, that actually sounds amazing, and I'm very excited to see what we can learn today, because I think there's so much going on, especially, for example, I relate this a lot to my experience of being an au pair. So basically for 2 years, I watched a 2-year-old
Right.
girl till she was 4. And you go through a lot of these phases of when the kid actually sees somebody getting hurt or they get hurt and how they respond to that. So I think we could definitely kind of see if we can relate it to the research and see what we can
That would be very
connect.
fascinating.
Sounds good. Yeah. And one more question that I had from the research. So you like pain? Why pain? What brought you to the topic to be interested in pain in the first
That's a very
place?
good question, which I can actually still remember quite a bit. So I always knew I wanted to work with children. I had this kind of, even throughout my teenage years, fascination for how children develop. Did a lot of kind of voluntary work with children and children charities and kind of vacation camps or summer camps. And I just loved interacting with children and kind of getting to know them on a deeper level. So after my secondary degree, or about secondary school degree, I chose to study psychology to become a child psychologist and kind of work with children with difficulties. Didn't know exactly what yet, but I was always intrigued with children who kind of had challenges in their life and how can we support them and how can we kind of give them as much as an opportunity to have a good quality of life as possible. My main fascination for some reason was with cancer and childhood cancer. I found that really intriguing, fascinating, and in the most positive way. Like, I didn't like that kids were getting cancer, but more in the way,
Right,
although
right.
nobody does, of course, but more in the way, like, how can we support them as much as possible? And so at the end of my master's, I went to a few of my professors to kind of explore PhD topics and what the next opportunities might be with that kind of focus on cancer. And one of my professors had a project in development that was looking at pain experiences in children with leukemia. I was like, oh, that was one of the things that never, like, I had heard a lot about cancer, knew quite a bit about kind of chemotherapy, the impacts of chemotherapy. But I was like, oh yeah, they might experience pain as well, but it's not really talked about a lot. And that was got me in pain. So my main study in my PhD was around pain experiences during treatment for leukemia, with a particular focus on kind of medical procedures like lumbar punctures, bone marrow aspirations, and how the parents and the children dealt with that pain and the anxiety around that. But it got me interested wider in the pain concept of like acute pain experiences of vaccinations, chronic pain experiences because of a disease or just unknown why they have chronic pain. And yeah, I kind of steered away more and more from the cancer context to more the general pain context. So that's how I got into the pain world. Yeah.
Well, that is fascinating. And from your PhD project, did something unexpected or something that you really would like to share that you found out from following that project that you did?
Um, as you mean unexpected in terms of result for my own learning experience, or maybe both?
Mm-hmm. Or something, anything interesting that kind of came out of it, either something that you wanted to see, like the results, if you did see those, or if not, and what
Yeah,
were they? Something that
yeah,
maybe, yeah,
yeah.
that could be interesting.
So in general, my whole PhD project, in a way, I call myself very lucky because all the hypotheses we were testing came out. We found what we were hoping for.
Oh, that
Yeah,
is
it's very
nice. That sounds
unusual.
like a
Yeah, and
dream.
we tested it in a variety of studies, like
Yeah.
experimental studies where we induced pain in children, as well as kind of clinical studies like the children with leukemia or children with headaches. And in all of the studies, we found that in all of the studies we looked at parental distress and parental catastrophizing, which means parents who really focus on the child's pain find it hard to not think about it, but also find themselves feeling very helpless in how to appropriately deal with a child's pain. That's kind of the concept of catastrophizing. And we looked at how those two things, so the concept of cognitively catastrophizing about your child's pain and feeling distressed by your child's pain, how that impacted their behavior. And in all of the studies, we kind of found what we were expecting, that parents who catastrophize about the child's pain feel more distressed and anxious around their child's pain experience, and then engage in what we call more protective responses. So reassuring their child, telling their child it'll be fine, it won't last long, it'll be over soon, don't worry. Those so kind of, yes, strongly protective responses, and felt to engage in kind of more appropriate responses like distracting their child, providing relaxation to their child, providing coping techniques to their child to deal with the pain. And our kind of underlying hypothesis there was that they engage in these protective responses to reduce their own feelings of distress, because they are feeling so overwhelmed by the situation that this is how they automatically react to their child's pain, so they can feel less distressed and then help their child. So it was nice to kind of find that across a variety of settings. And it has kind of impacted. The nice thing from that clinical study in children with leukemia was that it's impacted clinical practice, in that they now, at the start, when a child is diagnosed with leukemia, in that clinic where I did my research, they're now screening the parents on these catastrophic thoughts. Now they see that parents are high in catastrophizing about their child's pain experiences. They provide them with extra resources, support, to deal with their own feelings of distress when a child is in pain, so they can more appropriately support their child and focus on their child. So that's a nice kind of clinical implication of that whole project. But what I learned was that that is where, from that point onwards, my fascination from the wider social context came about, because especially in the clinical study with children with leukemia, I spend a lot of time in the waiting rooms with the parents, just waiting on the procedures to happen. And what do you do if you're waiting together? You have a chat and you talk. So I learned quite a bit from the informal chats, which I couldn't use in my research to kind of progress my future research, as we focused on children and parents and that interaction. But there's more people in a child's life than the parents. There's siblings, there's friends, there's school, there's a potential teacher or a couple of teachers to have good relationships with. So from that kind of context, my fascination became with a wider social context, and how can we look at kind of that wider impact and support that wider environment. It's not just the parents and the children who are impacted by these things.
Interesting. So when you said, so you were looking at parents and how they perceive their child's pain, right? And how they kind of, their state of worry about the child's pain encourages them to engage in the protective behaviors, such as soothing and it'll be okay. So how or what is there, probably is, a connection between how the child then reacts to whatever is going on? So what is the connection there? Because I can see that if the parent is so protective, then the kid can think, oh my god, this is so bad, I should be in a lot of pain because my mom is really trying to soothe me a lot, or vice versa. If that's not happening,
no,
what do you think
exactly.
about that?
You hit the nail on the head there. So in previous studies before my PhD, there had been a relationship found that parents who engage in these reassuring, protective comments or behaviors, the children in those situations have higher levels of pain, higher levels of anxiety. And this is in the context of acute pain, mostly like during vaccinations that was found, but also in the context of chronic pain. These children with parents who engage in these protective behaviors reported more kind of pain interference, so it impacted their daily activities more. They couldn't engage as much as they wanted to, for example, go to school or see friends. And they would also consult healthcare professionals a lot more, so they would go a lot more to kind of seek help and find help and support for their pain. So we did see that these kind of protective responses indeed impact their. It's very interesting because these protective responses are automatic. There's also a study out there that shows that automatically parents do engage in protective responses. Automatically, you do say these reassuring things. And you need to kind of in some way inhibit that automatic response, overcome that automatic response, and engage in more coping, promoting, like providing distraction, providing coping techniques, providing relaxation. But it's hard to do that, to overcome that automatic response. And it's interesting how our automatic response as a parent is actually not the best response, because it makes each kids think, like, if they're not in pain yet or they're not worried yet, but your mom is saying, oh, don't worry, it'll be over soon. That to the kids signals, oh, but I wasn't worrying. Should I be worrying? Okay, I better start worrying. I'm
Right.
delayed now in my worrying. So there's a very strong relationship. And then the child becomes more anxious, which makes the mom becomes more anxious. And it's kind of that vicious circle that they start to engage in. But also in some situations, it is a very anxious child that induces the anxiety in the parents. It's truly that kind of mutual interaction, and it's not always clear where it's coming from, if it's first the mom or the dad who's anxious, influencing the anxiety in the child, or if it's first a child being anxious, influencing mom and dad to become anxious. And that kind of is still a chicken egg problem, or is maybe in one sense also individualistic. It depends on the specific child or parent where it comes from first.
I love this. Like honestly, my friend, she has a daughter. She will be turning 2 in July, and it's in that stage where she's walking, but
Yeah.
she's still wonky. Like she walks on the stairs, and me and my friend's reaction is just like should we do something? Like should we go hold her, or should we just like let her figure it out? Like how many steps are there? How dangerous it probably is
Mm-hmm.
if she falls, and then she would fall, right? Or she would like trip over something, and then there's this like go grab her, go get her, go give her a hug or something. And then there was this instance where she fell. She was still in the spot. She just looked at mom to see what's going on. Like should I as the kiddo freak out, or am I actually okay to get up and just keep
Yeah.
on about my life? And you could see how she's kind of waiting to see, mom, is this okay? Maybe I hurt a little bit, but I don't need to scream or cry. And most of the time she's fine. So that's just so nice to watch. And then other times, the child actually
Yeah.
starts crying, then she goes and comfort her. And but it's amazing. I think that kind of ties into the second
Mm-hmm.
topic we'll be talking about today. But
Yeah.
so we might stay off of that, but that's just something that you reminded me of as you were talking about that. And in terms
Mm-hmm.
of the anxiety, right? So you said that we don't really know what the trigger might be, kind of the chicken egg and egg problem. So in connection to long-term physical pain or chronic pain, how can trying to reduce anxiety help manage long-term physical pain
Yeah,
or
that's
chronic
that's a
pain?
good question. And we do see a lot of what we call comorbidity, so co-occurrence between anxiety and chronic pain experiences. Most of the research has kind of focused on anxiety related to the pain experiences. So there's chronic pain, and then you create anxiety around
Mhm.
that, and how can we reduce anxiety related to that pain. For example, oh, I better not go for a walk today because I might increase my pain. So this kind of avoidance of activities is induced by anxiety, that the activity might increase the pain experience. But more and more, we also see kind of comorbidity with general anxiety. Just people who are generally anxious might be more prone to develop chronic pain or experience chronic pain. And that relationship isn't entirely clear just yet, how that influences each other. But we do realize or know that higher levels of anxiety can be related to higher levels of pain or pain interference. And being able to reduce the anxiety, the emotional response, either whether that's towards your pain or in generally being very anxious and responding to negative experiences, can help you to cope with the pain better, in the sense that we will never be able to take pain away from a person's life, whether that's acute or chronic pain. In the context of acute pain, everyone experiences pain every now and then. In the context of chronic pain, it's very likely if you have chronic pain, we might not be able to solve that pain in the sense that people see it will take that pain away. Very likely, if you've been diagnosed with a chronic pain condition, you have that pain for your life, whether that's a continuous experience
Mm.
or if that's kind of in flare-ups, a bit worse one day, better the next day. And then it's really important that you learn to cope with these pain experiences so that you can still have a good quality of life, or that you can engage in the things that you find important in life. And that's totally individually what that might be. And learning to deal with anxiety will help a lot around also learning to deal with pain experiences. It's about trying to understand where is the anxiety coming from, why am I having these thoughts. And a lot of the times, I like the techniques that cognitive behavioral therapy uses for that. It's kind of linking what I feel will influence what I think, will influence how I behave. And all of that is kind of related to each other. And if you're feeling anxious, that's a very valid feeling, but it's good to kind of get a better understanding where is it coming from. So when I'm feeling anxious, what do I feel in like a physical way? Do I feel tense? Is my heart racing? Do I sweat? Like every variety of things like that. What did I do in that context? And then what did I think? Like, what were my thoughts? And especially the thoughts I find really interesting to try and note down as many as possible, but then also identify the one that's the most influential, that you feel like, yeah, that was the key thought on my mind. And then trying with that key thought that's influencing the anxiety to work with that and trying to kind of somewhat challenge that and be like, is that really a valid thought? Like the feeling of anxiety is very valid, but the thoughts behind them might not be as true as you may think they are. And so trying to kind of decipher the anxiety and deal with the anxiety, and then hopefully after it's feeling calmer, oftentimes we combine it with some kind of relaxation or mindfulness technique, so that after all this kind of thinking and reflection, you can also relax and take a step back. But we use similar techniques with pain, and it's a lot around coping with the pain, is coping with the emotional impact of the pain and how anxious it makes us feel and how frustrated it makes us feel and how we're frustrated, how it impacts our life, that we can't do X, Y, and Z today because we're in pain. And being able to kind of have a more positive reflection on that, understanding that yes, today I'm in a lot of pain, I will have to cancel my plans, but I'll take it easy today. I'll rest. I'll maybe do a little bit of physical activity, like a small walk around the block to just keep my muscles moving. But then hopefully tomorrow will be better. So getting that kind of positive reflection and understanding of how pain makes you feel, and the same kind of reflection on how it makes you feel, how you behave when you're in pain, and how these kind of emotions, behavior, and physical sensations all link into each other. I feel if you can deal with that with anxiety, you can also deal with that with pain, and that kind of goes hand in hand with each other. Sorry, that was a very long-winded response.
No, that's completely fine. I'm just trying to think. So you said, so when I have this, okay, so I have these symptoms of my chronic illness. So let's say, my joints are really sore today, and then I try to see if my reaction to the symptoms is maybe not as valid as I think it is after I do some thoughts. So I see kind of two ways of going about this, which you seem to have suggested. So one is
Yep.
kind of rethinking that, see if it's really what it is, and trying
Yep.
to maybe replace it with a better thought to see if that helps. But let's say that the thought is valid. It's actually, yeah, I do, this is what I'm going through. So then the other way would be, okay, so I'm going to manage my
Yes.
day around this to see if I, and
Yeah,
just take it
and that
easy
would be
that
kind
day.
of the acceptance part, where yes, we'll have bad days, and that can be hard to deal with.
Right.
But I think it's also an important part of being understanding that I will have bad days, and I might have to accept that yes, I might sometimes not be able to do what I really value, what I really want to do, and that's okay. There will be better days following. And sometimes we can reframe our mind and we can have a more positive attitude towards, okay, it was a pain day. I had lots of pain, but I was still able to go and get a coffee with my friend and talk to her about it. But sometimes it won't be that way, and sometimes it will have been a terrible day that you were just in bed all day, and then it's about going around. That's okay. I can accept that. I won't let that kind of influence my whole week now. We'll see how tomorrow goes.
Right.
I think the way we deal with pain in that way is very similar to how we deal with negative emotions and anxiety in that sense. So it's kind of regulating how we respond to it and understanding that it's fine to feel frustrated and anxious around it. Because sometimes when we have kind of a lot of pain, you might also think, oh, is something wrong? Did I do something wrong? And it's trying to put a halt to those anxiety feelings as well and be like, no, probably everything is fine. It's just a bad day, and kind of be more neutral around that. So yeah, kind of dealing with emotional pain and physical pain has a lot of similarities in that sense.
Would you say it's really like very tightly connected together, emotions and the actual physical
I
manifestation
would
of the
think
pain?
so, yes, because oftentimes when I've been asked, like in the media, to talk about pain, they're like, well, how is emotional pain different from physical pain? I'm like, sometimes it's hard to distinguish the two, because we often have a lot of emotional responses towards a very physical pain experience. And is that then physical pain or emotional pain? Yes, there was, for example, an injury, very physical. We can see you had a broken bone, but it might be that a person is more impacted by the emotions around that physical injury than the actual physical injury and the physical pain. So yes, they're very closely entwined, and the emotional reactions we have to our physical pain will very often be more important in how much we're affected by the pain in our daily life than the physical experience itself. So yeah, I would say they're definitely intertwined.
It reminded me of one example. If, let's say, somebody has a highly stressful job, um, they can't sleep really well, or they don't maintain social relationships because it's just so much they have to do at work, and they don't even feel motivated, a little bit depressed maybe. Would that be maybe one of the predictors to chronic illness or chronic pain, to experiencing maybe a chronic low back pain, or maybe pain, or chronic headaches?
Yes, stress is definitely a contributor. There's still a relationship, a very complex relationship, that we don't know what causes chronic pain. It's we
Right.
don't know. There's a
Okay.
variety of a lot of factors contributing, and a variety of things having to align in the same way to develop chronic pain. So we haven't solved that puzzle yet, that big question mark, what causes chronic pain. Yeah, who knows?
Hopefully one day.
But there is a very strong indicator that stress, whether it's work-related stress, stress in your family life, early lifehood stress, that then later on in life can reveal or can resolve into chronic pain experiences. Yeah, stress has a very big impact and a very big, contributor to chronic pain experiences, and quite disabling chronic pain experiences. And how that relationship exactly works, we're still not sure, but I do think it's something around the capacity. If you're stressed, then you're so focused on dealing with that stress, you have less capacity to deal with other things. Or the pain experience might just be a signal from your body to chill, take a step back, relax. Your body needs it.
Yep.
Your body's kind of giving you physical symptoms to be like, stop, you need to stop, you're taking it too far. But there's a variety of research going on that is trying to disentangle, like, what exactly is it that we know stress is a contributing factor to chronic pain experience, but why exactly? There's also research ongoing looking at like inflammatory factors, that if we're under high levels of stress constantly, we know that we're more prone to kind of get inflammation and things like that. And if it's chronic stress, that maybe that's kind of a more consistent risk factor as well, and that thereby we might develop chronic pain more prone to develop chronic pain. One potential avenue, but yeah, definitely stress is a big contributor to chronic pain experiences.
Yeah, because we noted a little bit earlier that chronic illness is something it doesn't really go away. That's something we can learn to manage. So what I was thinking is, if I have this type of job and I develop a chronic pain, if I change the job, if I change the lifestyle around, what are the chances that my chronic pain will
Yeah,
go away? Are there any?
it might be, and I think in that context, I often refer to migraine, which I don't think a person who has chronic migraines, or who has migraines in general, will ever be fully rid of the migraines. But we do see that if
Okay.
they change jobs, if they have a very high stressful job, the migraines are worse. And if they change jobs, and they kind of either a job that's more flexible, that can work around their migraines, or but they maybe just feel more attuned with the job demands, and they can just make it work for them, or they're more into that particular job. We do see that there's still migraines, but they're able to cope with them better, and they're often less frequent as well. So I think it's in the sense of, it might not solve the chronic pain problem, but it definitely makes it a lot more manageable. And that's potentially because while the stress has reduced, so your body is better able to cope with the pain experiences as well, or what kind of physical effects. But also, I feel like you might have more capacity. If then you do have a pain flare, for example, a migraine attack, then you feel capable, okay, I can deal with it because I've not constantly been under that stress and having to deal with my stress, that I have capacity, the mental, the physical capacity to actually deal with that migraine today. I think, yeah, maybe a combination of both.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, if I'm not consumed by the work, maybe I can actually take the energy or some of it to devote it to finding ways to actually cope with it, not just try to survive it, but actually really like take the steps and have that energy to take the steps in the first place and actually try and
Exactly.
feel better. That makes a
Exactly,
lot of
because you only
sense.
have
Yeah.
so much energy
Okay.
in a day, and everyone has a limited amount of energy. And
Right.
coping with something like chronic pain demands a lot of energy, demands a lot of kind of your capacity.
Yeah.
If on top of that you have high levels of stress or a high demanding job, that also requires a lot of energy. So it's where kind of do you give your energy, and the more energy you give to dealing with the high levels of stress of your job, the less energy you've got left to deal with your pain. And even if you don't have a high level stress job, you still have just a limited capacity of dealing with anything. And
Mm-hmm.
pain is one part of that if you have a chronic pain experience. So you have to be very careful. People often refer to it as pacing, making sure I pace myself. If I do this today, then I know tomorrow I might just have a lesser day. I need to take it easier because I had a very high intensity day today. For example, a day of going shopping. That sounds really just fun for everyone, but for a person with chronic pain, that is like, okay, today I go shopping, and probably tomorrow I have to just take it easy and stay home and take a rest day. And then the next day I'll be ready again. So they know like how to pace themselves in that sense. And that's a quite interesting concept, I think.
And I think that's very interesting to see. We can be sometimes very self-centered in the way, okay, shopping for us
Yeah,
is relaxing. So we know that not for everybody it might be, but for somebody that might actually be the thing of the day that actually is really hard for them to do in
exactly.
the first place. And that is the thing that they need to take a break from and like actually relax. I think that's a really good point to see and try to see other people's
Yes.
perspective and not be like, well, I go shopping. Everybody goes
Yeah.
shopping. It's fine to go shopping.
Yeah.
You know, it's fun. Well, not always. Not
Depends.
for
Yeah,
everybody.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we could add the little drop in here. How does this concept of chronic pain relate to childhood experiences? Because that is one of the
Yeah.
areas of interest that you have. How my future potential or probability of developing chronic pain, whether it be from stress or from maybe an injury, how can it be related to
Yeah.
my childhood?
So this is indeed kind of a more recent avenue we've been going into, inspired by lots of research coming out very recently around the role of adverse childhood experiences like abuse, neglect,
Mhm.
all those kind of things influencing or being related at least to chronic pain experiences in adulthood. So there's been quite a few studies coming out making that link, but we don't understand the link very well. And
Okay.
in some of the recent projects, we've been looking at the link. Does adverse childhood experiences maybe lead people to be more anxious in general and be quite anxiety prone, which in turn might lead to chronic pain? That's one hypothesis that seems to be more or less supported. We do see a strong relationship between adverse childhood experiences and anxiety experiences, and then on the other hand, between anxiety and chronic pain experiences. But there was also in that study a direct link between if you had adverse childhood experiences, you were twice more likely to actually experience chronic pain in adulthood, regardless of your anxiety experiences. So there's still something going on. So I'm involved in a large project at the moment, which is led by the University of Dundee and has a large variety of components to look at exactly what is going on that links adverse childhood experiences to the experience of chronic pain in adulthood, looking at some changes in our brain, some looking also just in emotional experiences, the amount of support we had during those adverse childhood experiences, the support we had maybe later as an adult to work through those traumatic experiences. And and later life experiences as well. So in that project, we're working with people with lived experience who have both adverse childhood experiences as well as chronic pain experiences in adulthood. And through their kind of input on the project, we also realized that their experiences, for example, partner relationships in adulthood, could be a protective or a further vulnerability factor. They could have had very good partnership relationships, and that could actually protect them to develop health consequences later on in life, or they could have further abusive partner relationships, which could actually further put them at risk for chronic pain experiences. So it seems like there's a lot of factors going on around the support you got, the emotion processing you did at the time as a child when the event happened, but also later on as an adult. And it seems like the more and more I talk to people with lived experience, that it's a kind of an ongoing process. And it's not like, oh, this happened in childhood, I dealt with it in childhood, that's it now. Even if they dealt with it in childhood, throughout life, there are triggers which kind of flare up the adverse childhood experience in memory and makes them having to deal with it again if they want to be in a good place. So it feels like an ongoing challenge if you've had adverse childhood experiences. And like I said, the literature isn't very far yet on how exactly it's related, but there seem to be a variety of pathways from like emotional responses like anxiety, inflammatory responses that are being changed in your brain that might make you more prone to develop chronic pain. But we're not exactly sure about the mechanism going on. But what we do know is that if you had adverse childhood experiences, you're definitely at a risk for developing chronic pain later in life. Which fascinates me in a way because that means, okay, can we intervene? Can we do something? Can we support children or young adults who have these adverse childhood experiences better? Can we put something in place earlier on in their life that prevents that development? But to know that or how to do that, we do need to know more about the mechanisms that's going on.
This opens up so many questions. So first of all, the fact if I have a good social support, which could be a romantic partner or maybe even friends and family. So depending on these connections, if I did have an adverse childhood experience, I could or not develop chronic pain based on how good of a social relationships I have. So that could either make me protected from developing chronic pain or make me even more susceptible to it.
Exactly, and this is what we're trying to find out. There's kind of evidence for both directions that if you have supportive relationships, that could be a buffer that we call like prevent you from developing chronic pain. But we also see the opposite happening, that people who had an adverse childhood experience or a couple of adverse childhood experiences seem more prone to repeat that pattern in relationships and seem more prone or more at risk to have more abusive partnership relationships, have more abusive friendship relationships, be in a context of abuse in a general environment. So they're at a higher risk for these kind of vicious circles of relationships. And we're not sure if that's because that's what they knew as a child and kind of it's hard to get out of that pattern of relationships, or if it's just coincidence. But it's interesting that we see that a supportive environment can be protective, but if you had an adverse childhood experience, then it's hard to receive that support as well. So it's a bit of a double whammy going on there for them.
Yeah, that definitely sounds tricky and very complex. And another thing that kind of popped up in my mind was the fact that we were talking about people who actually know that they had adverse childhood experience. What if, we have a person who has had one, was too young to remember, or just is unconscious now? Like they don't even remember that actually happened. And how that could even potentially relate to the social connections they have and the quality of these social connections, because I can see that some people repress very reasonably what has happened to them, and they, even if maybe somebody told them this could have happened, they would maybe even deny that happening or connect it to the way they're thinking today, or the way they approach friendships or relationships with people. I think that's
It
very
is very
interesting.
interesting, and it's actually something that a group of people with lived experience has brought up as well, in the sense of what if you were too young and you don't remember, or you repress it, and some of
Yeah,
them had experience of repressing it, and they're not dealing with it until later in life, because every now and then it did pop up and they pushed it back again until they were like, no, I have to deal with it now. But they were sometimes 40, 50 years old when they realized, I have to actually deal with this now, and it happened when they were very young.
right.
But then one thing that they brought up that I never thought about is, maybe you don't realize you had an adverse experience because you assumed that was the norm. You assumed that was okay behavior from the adults, and because you didn't know anything else. And like you said, children look up to their parents to know what's right in the world, to know how to respond to things, to know what's wrong, what's good. Um, so if you have an abusive parent, but that's all you know, then you might assume, okay, that's it. That's actually
That's actually
normal.
normal.
And then it isn't
Right.
until you grow up and get more interactions with peers or get more interactions with other people, and that you realize, oh, wait a minute, this is actually not normal. And that could be very late in life as well, or kind of later on in life. And that was a situation I hadn't even considered. That I was like, okay, they might actually normalize that behavior. And that in particular made me think that is not surprising that they are more prone to have these more negative interactions with friends and partners, because if they feel that's normal, then of course they'll be looking for that type of behavior from other people, their friends, their partners. But especially also in the sense of that if you repress it, and you're not dealing with it, I think that also makes you more prone to engage in these other negative relationships, because you were so young or you didn't remember, but it has kind of gotten a very basic contribution to how you see the world. If you were so young, if that happened, that will influence how you'll engage with other people throughout your life. So it's a very fascinating field with so many avenues and different ways in which it's impacting people. And every single conversation we have for a group of people with lived experience, like, it's so individual. For every single person, it's very individual, and we need individual approaches. Kind of in treatment, there's no one size fits all, and we need to just be able to listen to the person's story, understand their situation, and then approach them in treatment in the way that suits with them and suits their situation.
So we need to be very individual when we maybe treat or talk to people with these experiences. How does that translate into doing research with these people? Because it needs to be so individual. How do you then look at hospitals dealing with people like that? How do you apply it on the larger scale when you really need that individual approach?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Um,
That's a
oh,
good question, because it kind of relates to what I'm doing on that big project that's led by Dundee. Because what we're trying to, like,
okay.
what my role is in the project is trying to design a questionnaire to assess adverse childhood
Hmm.
experiences in an appropriate, sensitive way, with the people with lived experience, to make sure that what the questionnaire is assessing is relevant to them, but also sensitive, doesn't re-traumatize them, because oftentimes the questionnaires that they're completing, when they're filling them in, they're re-traumatized because it makes them think too much in too much detail about the event, and it kind of re-traumatizes them. So what we did was kind of do a systematic review of all the questionnaires available in the literature to assess adverse childhood experiences. We found 29, and none of which the people with lived experience liked. They all had something bad to say about them, and I
All
must
right.
agree, there's some pretty bad ones out there. There's some good ones that we could work with. So we identified 3 of them that were reasonable. Neither of the 3 had it perfectly right. And we've tried to combine the 3 together with some input, with extra questions from the people with lived experience. And now we have a questionnaire we are ready to test. And with our questionnaire, what we're hoping to do is, be comprehensive and individual and sensitive. So in the sense of trying to be individualistic or individual focus in research, is trying to be as comprehensive as possible. So it's quite a big questionnaire, just to make sure that we can capture everyone who and can kind of make a connection with everyone who might have a type of a childhood experience, that we not just focus on neglect or abuse, but also on more subtle experiences like bullying, or subtle experiences like a divorce is a very tricky one, I feel, because many children might have experienced divorce, and for some they're like, I'm fine, that's not a, for me that's not an, for example, a adverse childhood experience. But for another child, it might be a terrible experience, and they might be very well impacted, very negatively impacted by the divorce of their parents. So in that sense, we're trying to make it individual in the sense that we're trying to be as inclusive as possible, as open as possible. And at the end of it, we have, please add anything else that you feel is relevant for the researchers to know that we haven't asked you about. So they can provide more context if they want around the situation they have identified, or they might say, this wasn't listed, but I also experienced this, and I found that quite traumatizing, for example. But it does make it hard that, and this is a conversation we often have with other people with lived experience. We really understand that we need to be individual and understand every individual's kind of response and experience and situation. But in research, we still need standards and standardization and generalizability.
Right, exactly.
So it was a really interesting conversation when we were developing the questionnaire between kind of remaining general standard and including that individualistic perspective. So I think we got it right, but we'll see what the results tell us. And then in clinics, that's our next step, to make sure the instrument we have now is too long, it's too expensive for in clinics. It's mostly for research. But in clinics, we're hoping to kind of make maybe a screener, or kind of have some key questions that people could ask when they interview, when they see a person for the first time, what we call intake, to kind of see, okay, if we have these screening questions, we might need to, we're okay, we don't have to explore further. Or if we see kind of some red flag on these screening questions, we need to ask a little bit more about adverse childhood experiences and in an informed, trauma-informed way. I need to explore that a bit more, and based upon that, kind of adjust maybe their approach towards that person. And I think it's really, I think clinics are really have come far in that way, in that kind of, it's a collaboration between the patient and the healthcare provider. And it's not just the healthcare provider saying, we're going to do X, Y, and Z and you'll get better. And it's really trying this kind of mutual communication between how does the pain look like in your life? How does it impact your life? And kind of trying to understand their life history, and then based upon that, kind of decide together with the patient what the next step might be, what would be good approaches to try out. It's really become kind of that more mutual conversation, or bi-directional conversation, step by step.
Yeah. Taking it from the individual to something more applicable, like comprehensively, that's a task.
It is.
That really is. It really is. So is this the developing the scale, the measurement, is that the project that you're working on at the moment?
That is the
Is
project,
that the new?
yeah, exactly.
Okay. That is so. And how far along are you then by now? Like, are you in the middle, kind of
Towards the end,
finishing?
so we have the questionnaire available now. It's submitted to a large cohort here in Scotland, cohort study, to assess the validity and the reliability of it. So that's now submitted there. People are filling it in. So hopefully we'll get some data soon to see if it's valid, reliable. We know we've worked very hard with the people with lived experience to develop that questionnaire. They like it, they seem it's appropriate, but now we also need to test it from a kind of statistical standpoint if it's also a working questionnaire. So we're at that point, and if that data looks good, then we're ready to launch it. So yeah, but then I think by the end of the year, hopefully we'll get something out.
Oh, that sounds incredible. That sounds great. I hope it works out, and maybe we'll get to talk about the results of it one day. Maybe. That sounds, because it does sound like something that any individual going through this could see the potential in being able to be understood from the healthcare professional a little bit more, therefore motivate them to even seek the help. So it just sounds like something important and needed. So fingers crossed it goes all well. Yep. Fingers crossed. So in relation to the mental and physical pain, what are some of the ways one can handle both physical and emotional pain every day? Can you maybe pinpoint some of the techniques or tips or tools that you find that work a lot of the time, or not a lot of the time, maybe that kind of
Yeah.
stand out to you, in that
So I think
process?
I've already mentioned it. The pacing is a very big one to make sure that you don't kind of
Mhm.
overcharge every day, and that you're just having, being aware that you have limited amount of energy, and to know like, okay, today I can do this and this, and it's probably going to be enough, and then tomorrow I can do that. And that kind of goes hand in hand with goal setting as well. I think it's important to be quite reflective on what's the values in my life, what do I really want, what do I really care about in life, and where do I want to go, what are my goals, and then step by step breaking those goals down in small pieces so you can reach them, and then with your pacing that you can step by step reach them. And they might take you a bit longer than you had hoped for to reach them, but I'm pretty sure you'll be able to get there. And then together, both the emotional and the physical pain, the kind of understanding the cycle between emotions, physical sensations, behavior, and thoughts, and how those are all connected and all kind of influence you. And if you can kind of break that cycle of negativity, that's really a key aspect as well, to kind of, it doesn't have to take ages. It can just be 2 minutes that you step back and reflect, okay, what am I thinking? Okay, that's probably not a correct thought. Let's make that a more positive, more balanced thought. And there might still be negative aspects, but let's make it a more balanced thought, and then get on with your day. So I think that's a really helpful technique as well. And then for some people, meditation, relaxation helps. For other people, it totally doesn't. But that could be an aspect as well. And what I think for everyone is quite helpful is peer support. If you can find another person with chronic pain, or a group of people with chronic pain that you can relate to, that you can connect with, in whatever shape or form. For some people, that's really just in face to face. For other people, that's via WhatsApp or a Facebook group. I think that's really important, the peer support, because that reduces your feeling of I'm alone. This is just me, which it isn't. Many people are suffering with this, and just having to have that other person or other people that you know have a similar experience and you can go to when you're having a bad day can be very helpful.
So one thing, an example, you have a person who has chronic pain, they have chronic low back pain, right? And they tell you, I don't need to pay attention to my emotions. They don't matter. I have my pain. I'm just gonna go on with my day, go to work. I'm gonna be grumpy. I know that. There's nothing I can do. I'm gonna die one day anyway. How would you approach a person like that they don't see any reason to engage in any, maybe kind of being self-aware of what is going on inside their head. They don't think it's relevant. It's just what it is, and they're kind of knowing over the pain. They're just going through with it.
Oh, that's difficult. I think there's two ways. One, they might just not be ready yet. And that's sometimes we have to accept that we can't help everyone. Sometimes we might see the links, but if they don't see them, then whatever I'm going to tell them is not going to help them. They're not going to do it anyway. They're not going to be convinced. So you have to be convinced yourself of the link before you're able to do something with it. So one way might be, I would feel very bad, but I probably can't help that person. They're not yet in the right mindset, and come back to me in 6 months,
Yeah.
maybe. Hopefully he'll see it. But what I would try to do, if they're open to that at least, is have them keep a diary. Not do anything reflective just yet, but just write down, today I had that much pain. That was my level of pain. This was the activities I did. This was how I felt. These were my emotions, and maybe rate them on a level of 10. And what was I going to say? So the intensity of the pain, what you did that day, your emotions, and how you all felt about it. What you thought. Sorry, what you thought. That was the I was the one thinking as well. And what your thoughts were. And keep that diary for 2 weeks, maybe a month. And I'm pretty sure, or a lot of the time, people will be like, I do see a pattern. But they've come to it themselves. I didn't have to tell them, when you were in high levels of pain, you taught these things. Whether while you had a good day, you were more positive in your thinking, you had more positive feelings. I didn't tell them that. They came to the realization themselves by completing just a diary about. I don't call it reflecting. It's just, what did I do today? What did I feel today? What did I think today? How much was my pain? And then they'll for themselves start seeing patterns of pain intensity. Being high on a day was probably related to high levels of negativity, um, and bad thinking, or like anxiety thoughts, for example. While on good days, they felt good, they felt happy, they were optimistic, but they'll come to that insight themselves, and I wouldn't have to tell them. So that would be an approach I would probably take.
All right. So, two things that I'm kind of hearing and taking from this. So, if I have a person that has that attitude, like, doesn't matter, I'm in pain, I don't want to hear, I don't want to talk, I pay attention to my thoughts or emotions, like, it doesn't matter, you'll leave them be. Like, it's hard because sometimes this can be your really close friend or family member that they go through this and they have that experience. So it's not easy to be like, yeah, whatever. Maybe one day you'll realize, like, no, like, you're my mom or you're my brother, like, you're going through this, you don't have to. You could be doing things that actually
Mm-hmm.
could help you, but you're not seeing that. And in that moment being like, I gotta
Yeah,
let
I
them
know.
be. that's that's just like, I want to help. Why
I
don't you
know.
want to be
Yeah, I
helped?
know it's very
Like,
hard, but sometimes just
yeah,
it might even have the opposite effect if you
yeah,
give too much advice or too much, like, oh, you should do this or try this. It might just break the connection
yeah.
you've got already. So it's hard, but better to let them be indeed.
Hard. It's hard. Yeah, yeah. You just reminded me of that. Like, yeah,
Mm,
sometimes you just gotta let it go, even though
I
you
know.
really don't want to. Okay, and then the second thing, let's say that person is a little bit open to some suggestions, but not too much. So then you would offer them, okay, for 2 weeks, just try, take your phone or a little notebook and just write down what you did that day, how was the pain, and
Yeah,
how you felt about it. And for 2 weeks, just that. So that could be what, like, maximum
yeah,
4 or
very
5
short. Yeah,
sentences, maybe.
yeah,
Be really short, so it's not burdening them like, "Oh, I have to sit
no,
down for 20 minutes and just be
no.
writing my thoughts out." So
Yeah.
that's really nice. Okay, I might put that to the
Okay.
test. Let's see. And so just yeah, okay. That's very good. Do you have anything else you would like to add to this topic of physical and mental pain that maybe we didn't discuss or that's popping
No, I
in your
think
head?
that everything was quite comprehensive, interesting talk about that.
It's very good, and I think it's so common too, because so many people will, like, they have most of the time that I know, if you have stress, there's
Hmm.
some pain going on. Doesn't have to be chronic, but it's like, "Oh, I'm getting a headache.
Yeah,
Oh, why is that?" You know? It could be that you just didn't
yeah,
drink enough water, could be, possibly, but oftentimes if I actually ask that person, "Okay, how was your day today?" You know, how was it? And then it's like
yes,
a waterfall of things that went wrong that day. And like, oh, this happened at work, and my friend just called me like with some bad news. I'm like, all right, that can we see
yeah,
that potential for connection there? Like,
exactly.
maybe, maybe, yeah. So no, it's definitely very interesting, and I think sometimes overlooked just because it's becoming
Mm,
a normal thing. It
yeah,
feels like almost sometimes. Oh, I have this pain. I've had it for years. I don't do anything about it. Like, you can actually be doing
exactly.
something about it. Let's see a way if we can. Yeah. No, that's very nice. That's
You're
very
welcome.
nice. Thank you. That yeah. Would you like to dive into the children and the concept of pain? I am
I was
aware
just
of the
going to
time.
say, I did see
How
my
do you
other
feel?
meeting starting. I do have a meeting at 2 o'clock. I just let them know I'm a few minutes late. So I might need
Okay.
to end here on that note. But if you wanted to talk about the child pain
Okay.
experiences, happy to kind of put another time in our calendar to talk about that as well.
I would be extremely happy. So let's stay a little
Yeah.
bit if you have 2 minutes after. So we're just gonna say yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Lean. This is the end of our first ever podcast. I'm so happy. Thank you so much for
Thank you so
being
much
here.
for the
And I really do.
I was just going to
Yeah,
say thank you
go
so
ahead.
much for the questions. It was a really interesting conversation. And yeah, just it's inspiring always when I talk about my research and gets me motivated as well. So yeah, thank you so much for the invitation.
Okay, thank you, and hopefully
Thanks.
I'll
Talk to
talk
you
to you soon.
soon.